The autumn wind carried the scent of old paper and chamomile tea through Cornerstone Books, a cozy sanctuary tucked between a vintage clothing shop and an art gallery on Madison Avenue. Cassie Morgan moved between the towering shelves with practiced ease, her fingers trailing along worn spines as she reorganized the fiction section. The afternoon light filtered through the tall windows, casting golden patterns across the hardwood floors. She had always found peace in this place. Books never left without warning. Stories always had endings, even if they were bittersweet. Real life, she had learned, offered no such guarantees. The bell above the entrance chimed softly. Cassie glanced up from her work, ready with her usual welcoming smile, but the words died in her throat. Her heart stumbled over its own rhythm. Julian Westbrook stood in the doorway, raindrops clinging to his dark coat. 7 years had changed him in subtle ways. His jawline had sharpened, his shoulders had broadened, and there was a confidence in his posture that came from success and distance. But his eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had once memorized every line of her face, remained achingly familiar. Time folded in on itself. For a heartbeat, Cassie was 22 again, laughing in a college library while Julian whispered poetry between the stacks. Then reality crashed back, reminding her of the morning she woke to find him gone. His apartment empty, his phone disconnected, his promises turned to smoke. Julian's gaze swept the bookstore before landing on her. Something flickered across his expression, surprise bleeding into something softer, something that looked dangerously like longing. Cassie forced herself to breathe. She set down the books in her hands, steadying her voice before speaking. "Can I help you find something?" The formal tone felt like armor, thin but necessary. Julian took a step forward, his movements careful, as though approaching something fragile. "Cassie." Her name on his lips sounded like an apology and a question wrapped together. "I didn't know you worked here. 7 years is a long time to not know things." The words came out sharper than she intended, but she did not soften them. He nodded slowly, accepting the barb. "It is too long." Violet emerged from the back room, her arms full of newly arrived inventory. She froze when she saw Julian, recognition dawning on her face. Cassie had told her best friend everything about the man who had vanished from her life without explanation. Violet's protective instincts flared immediately. "Cassie, do you need help with this customer?" The emphasis on the last word was deliberate. "I'm fine, V, thanks." Cassie kept her eyes on Julian. "I'm assuming you're here for a book, not a reunion." Julian's expression tightened, but he did not look away. "Actually, I was hoping we could talk." "About what?" "The weather." "Your sudden interest in literature?" Cassie crossed her arms, hating how her pulse quickened at his proximity. "Or maybe you want to discuss the art of disappearing without a trace." "I deserve that." His voice dropped lower. "I deserve all of it. But there are things you don't know, things I couldn't tell you back then. Back then, you couldn't even say goodbye." The words tasted bitter. "So forgive me if I'm not interested in excuses 7 years too late." The bookstore felt smaller suddenly, the air thick with unspoken history. An elderly customer browsing the poetry section glanced over curiously before returning to her book. The espresso machine in the corner café hissed softly. Filling the silence that stretched between them, Julian reached into his coat and pulled out a business card, placing it gently on the counter beside her. The embossed letters read, "Julian Westbrook, CEO, Westbrook Technologies. I know I have no right to ask for your time." His voice carried a weight that spoke of sleepless nights and carried regrets. "But I'm asking anyway. There's something you need to see, something that connects to your family in ways you don't realize." Cassie stared at the card, her mind spinning. Her family. What could Julian possibly know about her life now? She had rebuilt herself piece by piece after he left. Her mother's medical bills, her brother's tuition, the small apartment she shared with Violet, none of that concerned him anymore. "My family is none of your business." I wish that were true. Something in his tone made her look up. The confidence that had armored him moments ago had cracked, revealing vulnerability underneath. "Your mother worked at Riverside Community Hospital, right? In the cardiology unit before she retired?" Cassie's blood went cold. "How do you know that?" "Because my father's company owned the building. Because there are things about that hospital, about your mother's pension, about the research funding that disappeared. He stopped himself, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she remembered too well. Please, Cassie, 1 hour. That's all I'm asking. Let me show you what I found. Her mind raced through possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Her mother had retired 3 years ago after the hospital changed ownership. The pension she had counted on had been reduced, forcing Cassie to take a second job to help cover expenses. At the time, they had been told it was due to restructuring. Unfortunate but unavoidable. If this is some game, it's not. Julian's eyes held hers. I spent 5 years building my company so I'd be strong enough to come back and fix what my father broke. I know that doesn't excuse leaving. Nothing can. But I'm here now, and there are truths you deserve to know. Violet appeared at Cassie's elbow, her voice low. Don't do this to yourself. He doesn't get to waltz back in, and I know. Cassie squeezed her friend's hand gratefully. Then she looked at Julian, seeing both the boy she had loved and the stranger he had become. 7 years of silence demanded answers, even if those answers would hurt.
Ice. Tomorrow.
2 o'clock. There's a coffee shop on 5th Street called the Daily Grind. She picked up his card, her fingers steady despite the storm inside her. 1 hour, Julian. That's all you get. Relief washed over his face, profound and unmistakable. Thank you. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, I never stopped thinking about you. Not once in 7 years. The bell chimed as he stepped back into the rain, leaving Cassie standing among her beloved books, her safe haven suddenly feeling less certain. Violet moved closer, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Are you okay? Cassie watched Julian's figure disappear down the street, swallowed by the afternoon crowds. I don't know. But I need to find out what he knows about my mother. That night, sleep came in fragments. Cassie lay in her small bedroom, listening to the city hum beyond her window. She thought about her mother's tired smile when she talked about the hospital, about the pride she had taken in her work. She thought about the pension reduction that had seemed unfair but inevitable, part of the cruel mathematics of corporate restructuring, and she thought about Julian. About the morning she woke to emptiness and the years she spent convincing herself she had moved on. Tomorrow would bring answers, but answers came with a price. Some doors once opened could never be closed again. The moon rose higher, casting silver light across her ceiling. Somewhere in the city, Julian was probably awake too, carrying his own weight of secrets and regrets. Whatever tomorrow revealed, Cassie knew one thing with certainty. The past was not finished with them yet. The Daily Grind occupied a brick corner building that had weathered decades of the city's transformation. Inside, the aroma of freshly ground coffee beans mixed with the sweet scent of cinnamon pastries. Cassie arrived 10 minutes early, claiming a table near the window where she could watch the street, her hands wrapped around a ceramic mug of black coffee, seeking warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. She had barely slept. Questions had circled through her mind like restless birds, each one leading to darker possibilities. What did Julian know about her mother's hospital? What had his father done? And why, after 7 years of silence, had he chosen now to resurface? Through the rain-streaked glass, she saw him approach. Julian moved with purpose, a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. He spotted her immediately, and something in his expression softened. Relief, perhaps, that she had actually come. He slid into the seat across from her, shaking droplets from his coat. For a moment, neither spoke. The coffee shop bustled around them with the afternoon crowd. But their corner felt isolated, suspended in its own fragile bubble. Thank you for coming. His voice carried genuine gratitude. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. Cassie met his gaze steadily. But if this involves my mother, I need to know. Julian nodded, placing the portfolio on the table between them. His fingers traced its edge, hesitating as though the contents held some terrible weight. Before I show you this, I need to explain why I left. He drew a breath. That morning, 7 years ago, I got a call from my father. He had just been diagnosed with a heart condition, something that required immediate surgery. He told me to come home to Boston right away. Cassie's expression remained guarded. You couldn't have called? Sent a message? Anything. I tried. Pain flickered across his face. I called you 12 times from the airport. Every call went straight to voicemail. I sent emails, texts. When I finally got to Boston, my father had already gone into emergency surgery. He survived, but barely. And when he woke up, he made me promise something. Julian's jaw tightened, the memory clearly still raw. He told me about a deal he had made, a contract with certain investors that funded Riverside Community Hospital. These people were not just businessmen, Cassie. They were opportunists who saw healthcare as a commodity. My father had borrowed heavily from them to expand his medical supply company, using the hospital contracts as collateral. Cassie's coffee had gone cold in her hands. What does this have to do with my mother? Everything. When the investors wanted to restructure the hospital to maximize profits, they started cutting costs. Staff benefits, pensions. Your mother's department was one of the first targets. They planned to replace experienced nurses with cheaper, less qualified staff. He slid a document toward her. Cassie recognized her mother's name immediately, highlighted among a list of employees marked for pension reduction. The date on the memo was from 4 years ago, a full year before her mother had even considered retirement. My father knew this was wrong, but he was trapped by the debt. The investors threatened to call in their loans, which would have bankrupted his company and destroyed everything he had built. Julian's voice roughened with emotion. He made me promise to fix it, to find a way to protect the people who would be hurt by this. But there was a condition. Cassie looked up from the document, her heart pounding. What condition? I had to disappear from your life completely. No contact, no explanation. The words seemed to cost him. The investors had done background checks on everyone connected to my family. They knew about us, about our relationship. They told my father that if I remained involved with anyone connected to Riverside Hospital, they would assume I was feeding information to employees trying to organize resistance. They threatened to accelerate their cost-cutting measures, to make the pension cuts even deeper. The coffee shop sounds faded to white noise. Cassie stared at Julian, trying to process what he was saying. So you just left? You made that choice for both of us? I thought I was protecting you. His eyes held hers, pleading for understanding. My father was dying. These people had the power to destroy your mother's livelihood, to hurt your entire family. I was 25 years old. I thought disappearing was the only way to keep you safe, while I figured out how to fight back. Cassie's hands trembled as she set down her mug. Anger and confusion warred inside her chest. You should have told me. We could have faced it together. I know that now. Julian's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. But I was scared and desperate. My father died 6 months after his surgery. Before he passed, he gave me access to all his financial records, every contract, every shady deal. He told me to use it to build something better. He pulled out another set of documents, these more recent. I spent the next 5 years doing exactly that. I created Westbrook Technologies, specifically to develop medical software that would expose inefficiencies and corruption in hospital management systems. Every line of code, every algorithm, was designed to protect people like your mother. Cassie scanned the papers. Contracts, patents, news articles about Westbrook Technologies, innovative healthcare solutions. The company had made headlines for exposing fraudulent billing practices at several major medical centers. She remembered reading about it, but had never connected it to Julian. Last year, my software uncovered something at Riverside. Julian's expression grew grim. The investors had been systematically siphoning pension funds into offshore accounts. Your mother's reduced pension was not just about cost-cutting. It was theft, plain and simple. They had been stealing from hospital employees for years. The revelation hit Cassie like a physical blow. Her mother had cried the day she learned about the pension reduction, though she had tried to hide it. She had worked for 30 years, dedicating herself to caring for patients, only to have her retirement security stolen by faceless criminals. Where are these people now? Cassie's voice shook with suppressed rage. Federal prosecutors have them. 3 are already in prison. 2 more are facing trial. Julian pulled out a final document, this one official-looking with government seals. The recovered funds are being redistributed to the affected employees. Your mother is entitled to full restoration of her pension, plus compensation for the years it was reduced. Cassie stared at the document bearing her mother's name. The amount listed made her breath catch. It was enough to secure her mother's retirement, to lift the financial burden that had weighed on their family for years. She looked up at Julian, searching his face for any sign of deception. Completely real. The checks are being processed now. Your mother should receive notification within the week. He leaned forward, his voice earnest. I know this does not erase what I did. Nothing can give us back those 7 years. But I needed you to understand why I left and what I have been fighting for ever since. Cassie's mind spun with the enormity of it all. The boy who had vanished without explanation had spent 7 years building an empire, just to right a wrong that had hurt her family. It was noble and infuriating and heartbreaking all at once. Still should have told me. The words came out softer now, less accusatory. We could have fought this together from the beginning. I was trying to protect you from becoming a target. Julian's hand moved across the table, stopping just short of touching hers. If they had known you were aware of what they were doing, they might have gone after you directly. I could not risk that. Violet's warning echoed in Cassie's mind. He does not get to waltz back in. But this was not a simple return. This was a man who had sacrificed everything, including their love, to wage a quiet war against corruption. My father always said that actions speak louder than words. Cassie's voice wavered slightly. You spent 7 years proving that. I suppose I spent 7 years trying to become worthy of a second chance. Julian's gray eyes held a vulnerability she had never seen before, not even in their college days. Not just with you, but with everyone. My father's mistakes hurt. I know I failed you, Cassie. I know I broke your heart. But I am here now asking if there is any possibility of forgiveness. The question hung between them, heavy with hope and fear. Around them, the coffee shop continued its rhythm, oblivious to the moment unfolding in the corner. Steam rose from forgotten cups. Rain continued its gentle percussion against the windows. Cassie thought about her mother's tears, her brother's student loans that she had helped cover, the nights she had worked double shifts to make ends meet. She thought about the emptiness Julian had left behind, and the reasons that had driven him away. Forgiveness is not something I can give you today, she spoke carefully, measuring each word. But understanding maybe that is a start. You did what you thought was right, even if it was the wrong way to do it. Relief washed over Julian's features, though he tried to contain it. That is more than I deserve. Probably. A ghost of a smile touched Cassie's lips, there and gone. But my mother raised me to believe in second chances, even when they are complicated. Julian's hand finally bridged the distance, his fingers gently covering hers. The touch sent electricity through her, memory and possibility colliding. She did not pull away. I want to do this right, Cassie. No more secrets, no more disappearing. If you are willing to let me try, I will spend every day proving that I have learned from my mistakes. Cassie looked down at their joined hands, 7 years of absence compressed into this single point of contact. She thought about the girl she had been, waiting for explanations that never came. And she thought about the woman she had become, stronger for the heartbreak, more cautious with her trust. One step at a time, Julian. That is all I can promise right now. One step at a time, he echoed, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. I can work with that. Outside, the rain began to ease, afternoon light breaking through the clouds in scattered beams. Cassie felt something shift inside her chest. Not quite forgiveness, not quite trust, but the tentative beginning of something that might grow into both. The past could not be rewritten, but perhaps the future still held pages yet unwritten. 3 weeks had passed since the revelation at the daily grind, and Cassie's world had shifted in ways both subtle and profound. Her mother had received the pension restoration letter, breaking down in tears of relief when she read the amount. Thomas had called from medical school, his voice thick with emotion, thanking his sister for years of sacrifice that might finally ease. Yet through it all, Cassie found herself thinking not about the money, but about the man who had made it possible. Julian had kept his promise. No grand gestures, no overwhelming displays. Instead, he appeared in small, consistent ways. A text in the morning asking about her day. A book delivered to Cornerstone with a note tucked inside referencing a conversation they had shared years ago. An invitation to coffee that came with no pressure, only hope. Cassie had accepted some invitations and declined others. Testing the boundaries of this fragile reconnection, each meeting revealed layers of the man Julian had become. He spoke openly about his therapy sessions, about learning to communicate instead of making decisions in isolation. He shared his failures alongside his successes, painting a portrait of someone who had grown through pain rather than despite it. Now, on a crisp November evening, Cassie stood outside an address Julian had sent her that morning. The building before her was under renovation, its brick facade partially restored. Scaffolding still clinging to the upper floors. A sign read, "Future Home of Riverside Community Health Center." Julian waited by the entrance, his breath misting in the cold air. When he saw her approach, his face lit with a smile that reached his eyes, genuine and unguarded. "Thank you for coming," he gestured toward the building. "I wanted you to see this before anyone else." Cassie studied the structure, noting the careful preservation of original architectural details alongside modern renovations. "What is this place?" "Justice, I hope." Julian pulled out a key, unlocking the heavy door, and maybe a little bit of redemption. Inside, the space had been gutted and reimagined. What had once been a warehouse now opened into a bright, welcoming reception area. Medical equipment still in boxes lined one wall. Paint samples were taped to another, labeled with room designations, cardiology, primary care, mental health services. Julian led her through the space, his voice carrying a passion she remembered from their college days when he would talk about changing the world. After the investigation concluded, the government seized the investors' assets. Part of the settlement included this building, which they had purchased with stolen pension funds. I worked with the prosecutors to have it designated for community health care. He stopped in what would become the main corridor, turning to face her. "Your mother's former colleagues, the nurses and staff who were pushed out of Riverside, they will have first priority for positions here. Full benefits, fair wages, and a say in how the center operates. No corporate boards, no profit margins, taking priority over patient care." Cassie walked slowly through the space, her fingers trailing along freshly painted walls. She could envision it filled with life, with the kind of compassionate care her mother had always believed in. This must have cost a fortune beyond the settlement. Westbrook Technologies is the primary investor. Julian's tone was matter-of-fact, but she caught the underlying emotion. "I have spent 7 years building something successful. It is time that success meant something beyond profit margins and stock prices." They climbed stairs to the second floor, where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The space here was designed as a break room for staff. Comfortable seating arranged around a fireplace, a kitchen area for shared meals. There is something else. Julian reached into his jacket, pulling out a folder she had come to recognize. More revelations, more pieces of the puzzle. "When I was going through my father's papers, I found something that belongs to you." He handed her the folder. Inside were architectural drawings, old and carefully preserved. Cassie's breath caught as she recognized her own handwriting in the margins. Notes and measurements from a design class she had taken in college. These were her projects, assignments she thought had been lost when she dropped out. "How did you have these?" Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "You left them at my apartment, the week before I disappeared. I packed them with my things when I left for Boston." Julian moved closer, though he maintained careful distance. "I kept them all these years. Sometimes when the work felt impossible, when I wanted to give up on everything I was trying to build, I would look at these drawings. They reminded me of what matters. Spaces that heal, that bring comfort, that serve people rather than profit." Cassie traced the lines of a community center she had designed as a sophomore, its rooms flowing into each other, creating spaces for gathering and solitude in equal measure. She had been so proud of this project, had imagined a future filled with such creations. "I gave up on this dream a long time ago." She blinked against the sudden sting of tears. "Life had other plans. Maybe life is giving you a second chance." Julian gestured around the empty space. This health center needs an interior designer, someone who understands that healthcare spaces should feel like places of hope, not institutions. Someone who knows how to create environments that heal the spirit while medicine heals the body. The implication hung in the air between them. Cassie looked at him sharply. You are offering me a job? I am offering you the opportunity to do what you were meant to do. His voice held steady conviction. Not because of our history, but because you are talented and this project deserves the best. I have seen your sketches at the bookstore, the way you arrange spaces to make people feel welcome. That is a gift, Cassie. One that should not be wasted. She wanted to argue, to insist that she was content with her life as it was. But standing in this space, holding drawings that represented dreams she had buried, something inside her cracked open. Want flooded in, fierce and undeniable. I have not designed anything professionally in 7 years. The objection sounded weak, even to her own ears, and you were overdue. Julian smiled, that gentle expression that had always undone her defenses. I have already spoken with the project manager. If you are interested, the position is yours. Full creative control over all interior spaces, competitive salary, and flexibility to continue at the bookstore if you want. No strings attached to our personal situation. This is business kept completely separate from anything else. Cassie moved to the windows, looking out over the city as dusk settled in. Lights began to flicker on across the skyline, each one representing lives being lived, choices being made, futures unfolding. She had spent 7 years in a holding pattern, convincing herself that stability was enough, that dreams were luxuries she could not afford. Why are you really doing all this? She turned to face him. The health center, the job offer, coming back into my life. What do you want from me, Julian? He met her gaze without hesitation. Honestly, everything. I want another chance to love you the right way, to build a life together that is not torn apart by secrets and fear. But I also know I have no right to ask for that yet, maybe ever. So I am starting with the truth and with actions that prove I have changed. The vulnerability in his admission made her chest ache. This was not the boy who had made promises under starlight, nor was it the man who had vanished into silence. This was someone who had been broken and had chosen to rebuild himself into something stronger. I am terrified, Cassie admitted, her voice cracking slightly. Terrified of trusting you again, of believing this is real, of letting myself want things I thought were gone forever. Julian crossed the distance between them slowly, giving her time to retreat if she chose. When he stood before her, close enough that she could see the silver threading through his hair at the temples, he spoke with quiet intensity. I am terrified too. Terrified that I have hurt you too deeply, that 7 years is too long to bridge, that I will fail you again despite my best intentions. He raised his hand, hovering near her face, waiting for permission. But I would rather be terrified and trying than safe and empty. These years without you taught me that much. Cassie closed her eyes, leaning into his touch as his palm cupped her cheek. The gesture was achingly familiar, muscle memory from a lifetime ago. When she opened her eyes, she found him watching her with an expression that held every unspoken word, every regret, every fragile hope. One step at a time, she whispered, echoing the promise she had made weeks ago. That is still all I can offer. One step at a time, he agreed, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. For as long as you will let me walk beside you, the kiss, when it came, was not born of passion, but of something deeper. It tasted of forgiveness offered in increments, of trust being carefully rebuilt, of two people who had been shattered choosing to piece themselves back together. Cassie's hands found their way to his shoulders, steadying herself against the tide of emotion threatening to overwhelm her. When they finally pulled apart, the city lights had multiplied, the darkness held at bay by human determination to illuminate the night. Julian rested his forehead against hers, their breath mingling in the cooling air. I will spend every day proving I am worthy of this, he murmured. Of you, of us, of the second chance we are building. Cassie smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in what felt like years. You've already started. Now we just have to keep going. 2 months later, Cornerstone Books hosted a small gathering. Violet had insisted on celebrating Cassie's new position as lead interior designer for the Riverside Community Health Center. The bookstore was closed to regular customers, filled instead with friends, family, and the people who had supported Cassie through the hardest years. Margaret Morgan stood beside her daughter, pride radiating from every line of her face. Thomas had come home from medical school for the weekend, regaling anyone who would listen with stories of his brilliant sister. Even some of her mother's former colleagues from Riverside attended, excited about the health center that would soon open its doors. Julian arrived late, apologizing as he navigated through the crowd to reach Cassie. He carried a wrapped package, rectangular and flat. "I wanted to wait until tonight to give you this," he said. Guiding her to a quieter corner of the bookstore, Cassie unwrapped the package carefully, revealing a framed sketch. It took her a moment to recognize it, one of her college designs, but modified. Julian had taken her original drawing of a community center and expanded it, adding wings and details that transformed it into something grander while maintaining her core vision. At the bottom, written in his precise architectural hand, were the words, "What we dreamed then, what we will build now." "The health center is just the beginning," Julian explained softly. "I want to create more spaces like it, places that prioritize people over profit. And I want you beside me, not just as a designer, but as a partner in every sense of the word." Cassie looked up from the drawing, finding in his eyes the future they had once imagined and lost, now reimagined with the wisdom that only pain and growth could provide. A partner? In business, in life, in everything. He took her hand, his grip warm and certain. "I love you, Cassie. I never stopped, not even when I should have. And if you will have me, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt it again." Around them, the bookstore hummed with conversation and laughter. Violet caught Cassie's eye from across the room, raising her glass in a silent question. Cassie nodded, a smile breaking across her face like sunrise. "Yes," she said simply, the word carrying the weight of 7 years of heartbreak and healing, of lessons learned and second chances embraced. Yes to all of it. Julian pulled her close, and as he kissed her, Cassie felt the final pieces of her guarded heart settle into place. The past would always be part of their story, but it no longer defined their ending. They had walked through fire separately and emerged with the strength to build something lasting together. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but filled with possibility. And for the first time in 7 years, Cassie was not afraid to dream.